Coming up on Market to Market, a new round of tariffs on more items is aimed at helping Americans. Spring weather hits hard in many parts of the Midwest. A look at the tradition of cheese making. And commodity market analysis with Kristi Van Ahn Kjeseth next.
What's next doesn't happen by chance. It happens when researchers and farmers work together to solve tomorrow's agronomic challenges. We're committed to creating what's next, because a pioneer, our name is our mission.
For over 45 years, Steiner Tractor Parts has shared your love of antique tractors. New parts for old tractors. Learn more at steinertractor.com or at 877-559-7887.
Tomorrow. For over 100 years, we've worked to help our customers be ready for tomorrow. Trust in tomorrow. Information is available from a Grinnell Mutual agent today.
This is the Friday, April 4 edition of Market to Market, the weekly journal of rural America.
Hello, I'm Paul Yeager. Government reports and new tariffs fueled wild moves and actions across the globe. To say the week was short on news would be drastically underselling and underreporting the story. First, the latest jobs numbers from the Labor Department. Employers added 228,000 positions in March, but the federal government made revisions on the totals for the 2 previous months. Additions were made in the healthcare and restaurant sectors, with losses recorded for government jobs. The unemployment rate ticked up to 4.2%. Part of the movement was on those entering the workforce in search of a job. The Dow Jones went below 40,000 this week for the first time since May of 2024, after hitting a peak above 45,000 in December. Several markets moved lower following Wednesday's announcement from the Rose Garden. And Peter Tubbs now breaks down the tariffs announced and the situation that could be setting the stage for a global trade war or just a massive show of bravado.
And today we're standing up for the American worker, and we are finally putting America first.
This week, the Trump administration placed tariffs on imports from virtually every country on the planet at rates that are higher than the infamous Smoot-Hawley tariffs of 1930. Trade analysts estimate that up to 68% of goods imported into the United States fall under the new tariff scheme. Economists estimate the cumulative cost of tariffs could act as a $3,800 annual tax on each U.S. household. While additional costs of agricultural inputs for the 2025 crop season are still being calculated, exporters of farm commodities are waiting on the reaction of trading partners around the globe. Retaliatory tariffs from export destinations would alter trade volumes in the coming months. The global reaction to the new tariffs has been cautious as nations discuss their options, both internally and with geographic partners. China responded with a 34% tariff on all American imports and controls on the exports of rare earth materials. Exports of bulk grain declined during the first Trump administration, primarily due to a tariff conflict with China. Farmers received over $60 billion in cash payments in 2019 and 2020 to make up for lost sales due to the tariff tiff. Grain exports rebounded during the Biden administration, with shipments in the last 4 years of each exceeding previous highs. During a visit to an Iowa ethanol plant on Monday, new Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins assured farmers that an aid plan will be in place if farmers need cash to offset trade disruptions.
If necessary, we are ensuring that we are set up, we have the infrastructure ready to make whole again what that will look like.
For Market to Market, I'm Peter Tubbs.
Spring planting is days away for the grain belt. The drought monitor has hovered in the mid to upper 60s for weeks and not gone below 60 since August of 2024. This week's weather pattern took on a volatile and wet change. David Miller has our story.
Spring weather hammered portions of the Midwest and South this week as tornadoes and violent storms tore a path almost 800 miles long across the countryside. Homes were flattened and buildings ripped apart from Oklahoma to Texas to Indiana. The system also dropped record-setting rains and created a situation for life-threatening flash floods. At least 7 people were killed in western Tennessee, Missouri, and Indiana in the first wave of weather that spawned powerful tornadoes. One of those tornadoes hit Lake City, Arkansas, destroying homes and turning over cars. Parts of Michigan, Kentucky, and Tennessee experienced localized flooding. The storms may not be done. Weekend weather predictions include more of the same, as daytime heating could combine with an unstable atmosphere and abundant moisture streaming in from the Gulf. For Market to Market, I'm David Miller.
The dairy industry has long been one that takes one product and turns it into many others. Milk, butter, and yogurt rise to the top of mind first, but it is cheese that's an industry in itself. The process of making cheese is centuries old, and the tradition is unlike any other. Josh Bittner reports in our cover story.
It's really neat how you just take a simple vat full of milk, and 6 hours later, you got 900,000 pounds of cheese. There's a lot involved in cheese making. There's art, there's science, there's passion involved.
Rufus Musser IV, or Junior as he's known in the rolling hills of southern Iowa's Van Buren County, is an integral part of a family operation helping to boost the local economy.
You got all your different products here: prairie breeze, garden vegetable, cheddar, tomato, garlic, black pepper, caramelized onion, 4-alarm, old-style cheddar. We're in all 50 states.
Satisfying demand for the award-winning globe-trotting cheddar cheese varieties crafted by Milton Creamery creates jobs and allows for profit sharing with fellow Mennonite and Amish-sourced dairies.
Cheese gets made in the other building, comes out here for aging. So what aging does, it allows the flavors to develop. This particular cheese has been here a little over a year.
It took a little time for Milton Creamery's gastronomic accomplishments to ripen as well. Junior's parents relocated their Mennonite family from Pennsylvania to Iowa in the early 1990s, away from selling homegrown produce and into dairy farming, which brought its own challenges.
We don't have a lot of population, so to get much milk out there, gonna have to do a lot of driving, a lot of delivery time. Dad kept looking at the price of milk in the store and the prices that he was getting on the farm, and he said, somewhere, somebody is making money in between here.
The eureka moment came around 2000 when the elder Mussers attended a value-added dairy conference in Wisconsin and came away convinced that specialty cheese making, not milking cows, was their best path forward.
That's straight off the farm right there.
Dad said, here's our niche. This is where we need to be. You bring milk in, because milk is 87% water, you take the water off, you condense it to cheese, now we can afford to ship it across the country.
After breaking in and lighting up farmers markets for several years with their celebrated cheese curds, Milton Creamery unveiled Prairie Breeze to much acclaim.
The American Cheese Society would describe it as a sweeter cheddar or a new age cheddar. We decided that's going to be the Cadillac, that's going to be what's going to drive the business forward, and it truly has.
Their success allowed for expansion, which helps ensure a steady stream of customers with discerning tastes. Just this summer, Milton Creamery's old-style cheddar won gold at the International Cheese and Dairy Awards in the United Kingdom.
Well known in Van Buren County and around the world.
County tourism officials celebrate the Mussers and a rising tide of similar endeavors, which help bring things like tax relief and school funding to local communities.
I mean, we're very fortunate we do have the Amish and the Mennonite and how they do work with us too. They know that they have wealth coming in, but they also want to share it. They support economic development. We have bakeries, wood carving, cabinet making. It offers unique tourism for people who want to experience their life or just buy that unique craft or food that they make.
The Amish reputation for exceptional craftsmanship and work ethic is well known. Though larger groups are found mostly east of Iowa, the Hawkeye State's Amish population ranked 9th in the U.S. in 2023 at just under 10,000, according to statistics compiled by Pennsylvania's Elizabethtown College.
Iowa actually has quite a large Amish Mennonite population, a plain population, and they're actually quite a big contributor to our agricultural sectors. In dairy in particular, Amish milk makes about 25% of the milk that's produced here in Iowa, so they're definitely big players.
Iowa State University assistant professor and dairy extension specialist Dr. Gail Carpenter says larger mainstream dairy producers, consolidated mainly into northern pockets of the state, harness various technologies to maintain high animal welfare standards and milking efficiency for their huge herds. She says while the Amish shun such advancements, Mennonite beliefs are less strict in practical application, though they adhere to stringent quality standards. Complementary partnerships have emerged, like Milton Creamery and the 5 dairy farms they buy from within 25 miles of their plant, the largest herd being 80 head. Together, they leverage value-added niche opportunities inside a smaller footprint.
They share a lot of the same values that their producers would, so I think that creates a lot of trust there. It's also a very competitive market trying to look for places to sell milk. It can be hard for small producers to find a co-op that wants to buy their milk from them because they just don't have the same volume as a farm that milks a lot more cows would have. So having that stability and that surety and that lack of risk with selling to Milton Creamery fits in with their culture and their values as well.
Carpenter adds each dairy cow in Iowa contributes roughly $24,000 to their local economies. And in a world of fewer producers, frayed connections between customers and food sources, a spirit of nostalgia has emerged, driving demand for products like specialty cheese. The Musser family's vision has led to benefits for their business and the region. For creamery workers, hard work also pays off, in more ways than one.
Forking the cheese curds, stirring the salt in, very intense. Also, when you put the 40-pound blocks into the hoops to put in the presses, between the weight of the hoops plus the cheese in it, you're looking at lifting 60, 65 pounds. I like to tell new employees when they start here in the production facility, you can cancel your gym membership.
For Market to Market, I'm Josh Bittner.
Next, the Market to Market report.
Market movement was muted following Monday's acreage and stocks report, but had a bigger response Friday to China's counter on tariffs. For the week, the nearby wheat contract added a penny, and the May corn contract gained 7 cents. Soybeans were down 40 cents in early trading Friday, limiting some of the losses following China's retaliation. The May soybean contract fell 46 cents on the week, while May meal declined $10.40 per ton. May cotton contracted $3.56 per hundredweight. Over in the dairy parlor, May Class 3 milk futures cut 78 cents. The livestock market was lower. June cattle decreased $6.65. May feeders lost $10.30. And the June lean hog contract shed $4.23. In the currency markets, U.S. dollar index declined 104 ticks. May crude oil plummeted nearly 11%, or $7.35 per barrel. COMEX gold weakened 68.20 per ounce, and the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index subtracted more than 10 points to settle at 550.25. Joining us now, regular market analyst Kristi Van Ahn Kjeseth. Hello, Kristi.
Hello.
Let's take away Friday, completely out of the mix. Let's just talk about the reaction to that report.
Yeah.
We'd hyped it up. We're guilty here on this show. Hyped it up a lot last week. Reaction muted. Then it took tariffs to move it. Why was the reaction muted, even though we increased corn acreage, decreased beans like we thought? Why?
Yeah, I don't think you amped it up. This is, I would say, the second biggest crop report of the year. So it typically is a very important crop report. But I think that there just wasn't enough changes. So stocks, for example, came in right at average estimates. So you had nothing there. But the acre number, you saw a very large corn acre number. The average estimate was in the mid-94s, and we got 1 million acres higher than that. However, even though the average estimate was 94, I think the week and a half leading up to that report, you had people that were more like, given the dynamic between corn and beans, it's got to be higher than that. And you have done nothing to help that situation since then. So I think you're even pushing that more, right? That was your wake-up call to soybeans to say, hey, if you want more acres, you need to be doing something here, and that obviously has not happened.
So did the retaliation by China change the story then?
I think emotionally maybe it changed the market, but when everything is said and done, I mean, it's just a matter of soybeans eventually finding its bottom. You know, where is that? And in our opinion, you're very close to those lines. You're at our first support line right now for both May and November soybeans. It's usually you rely so heavily on these technical support lines or resistance lines, and I would be there if it weren't for the fact that you had the retaliation from China. And I do think that you will have something come back from President Trump. So that's the biggest question is, over the weekend, what do we hear him say? He did say that, you know, China made the wrong decision. They made that knee jerk. But it'll be really interesting to see if he pushes those tariffs more or not.
So let's stick with soybeans then, because resistance was here and that you just talked about. The acreage wasn't there. Does this further depress the acres number, in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't think you're really reaching out to a lot of people right now and saying, hey, let's plant some soybeans here. The general look of soybeans, one, profitability is not there, but the fear of what's to come, I think is enough to shake some people away from wanting to. Now, when everything shakes out, you have your rotation, like what else are you gonna go to, especially for your core states? So it's not like you can drop it to zero by any means, but it's definitely not getting those. However, we have a lot that can change over the next month. You look at the sheer amount of moisture that has hit so many areas, and if you come in post-Easter and have another forecast that's wet, you're going to hear them talk about more bean acres because of the inability. And that's a lot. The current forecast is dry, but it's also cool. So you put all this moisture on there, it's cool. Will you have the ability to dry down? And if you put that next system on, that's where I think you start to talk about it. And then once again, that further pushes that relationship between corn and soybeans and just makes it worse and worse and worse for soybeans. And we need to kind of hit rock bottom in soybeans. And I think eventually they will do that. And then I actually think the longer term forecast, just because of the sheer lack of acreage, could be friendly soybeans, but you know, we got to find rock bottom first.
Well, I was going to ask on that November contract, can we see the rock bottom from here?
I think it all depends what you hear this weekend, right? You know, what do you hear from President Trump? Is he going to come back? And I think the big thing is right now we have two different stories. So we have China that came back with retaliatory tariffs, and then we have Vietnam, a conversation that was, hey, Vietnam's looking at taking their tariffs down to zero. They're willing to work with the U.S. And I think this is the big question is how many countries fall in line with what China's doing and how many fall in line with what Vietnam's doing?
Let's go to the commodity that seems to be the rebellious child or the one with the blinders on, and it's the corn market. Why?
My favorite child, right?
Oh, you picked one. Oh, that's bold.
But I think corn has shown such resilience. I really want to be friendly corn, especially old crop corn. But until it breaks out of this range, we're like smack in between that range, just let it be. And that's honestly how I was with soybeans. It couldn't break $10. It couldn't get above the 40-day moving average, and it just sat there. Now corn's kind of doing that same thing. But you have thrown so much bearish information at corn, and it has been very resilient that I feel good about it. And I do think that it's being able to separate itself. And I think some of that has to do with we have tighter carryouts in the U.S. Are they the tightest? No, not by any means, but we definitely are tight. World situation is tight. Demand seems to be extremely hot right now. And our top buyer, Mexico, seems to be working very well with President Trump to do what it needs to do to keep this relationship really tight-knit. And we need that because they're our top buyer.
Which goes back to a little bit of beans of if you really need something, maybe a deal will get worked out. Some optimism that you were wrapping up. I want to ask you a corn question here. Paul in Minnesota wanted to know, Kristi, any price targets or selling on new crop corn that you like?
Yeah, so if you look at new crop corn, you have always been able to get back to your crop insurance price from spring. That is something we rely on heavily. Now, past performance is not indicative of future results. However, I do want to rely on that. I do think that you're going to get a couple stories here and there. I do think that the old crop carryout is tight enough. when you pencil in that large acre number, you're also using a 181, which is what we should see in May. That's going to be really tricky to get with that many acres alone, right? Couldn't get it to it last year. Now you're asking us to get it on all these fringe acres that are being added. So I think that corn will be able to do that, but my first target on new crop corn would be around that 470, 475 mark.
And in 6 weeks, dramatically thing could change back to what your comments were at the end of soybeans, given
Right.
weather.
Right.
All right. Let's go to wheat for a minute, because that's still weather. Because when you talk about this weather line, Kristi, I look at where it is the driest. It's still in that wheat country.
Yep.
Has that become a bullish story yet for wheat?
I think it was, right? And then we drop back off. And I think the big question is, yes, you talk about how dry it's been, but then, there was this interesting thing that they were talking about, these storms that go in the background of these storm pictures. You're seeing winter wheat country, and I don't know about anyone else, but I was like, that winter wheat looks pretty good back there. And so I think it's a question of, we know how drought tolerant these crops are nowadays. So do we really have an issue? And I think even if we had an issue, we're still looking at an abundance of supply here in the US. Wheat is very similar to corn, tight on the world situation. So I think that's wheat's friendly, but the friendliest thing I think for wheat is the fact that if we can bottom here, the chart looks really good. You're looking at a W formation, double bottom, and if you really wanted to go back, there's a couple more bottoms past that are all very similar here. So if we can get out of here, which it was trying to do, I would feel very good about it, but we got to step back this week.
Looking at that chart, is that why you put hedges on? To protect yourself in case what happened this week on wheat?
Yeah, I think the big thing is just the unknowns that are around there when you look at all of these markets in general. I mean, you can put it on cattle as well. Cash can be as strong as it is, and you can continue to see that support on the cash side of things. But realistically, we have some real threats here. And the big thing when you talk about the tariffs, it doesn't matter if it's making an immediate impact or not on the demand side of things. The emotional impact is there, and we saw it today. You see it with the stock market. You see it with the crude oil, right? Crude oil down so hard the last 2 days. Lower crude oil prices are not a friend to corn.
Which at this point hasn't needed any, but as you said, thrown a lot of bearish things. Let's go to livestock, because that's had a lot thrown at it. Limit down on the three that we cover the majority. Let's start with live cattle. That gap lower, then limit down. Is this the end of the longs?
I think that you probably have about 6 more bucks. So when you look at it somewhere between, when you're talking about June live cattle, 188 to 192, I think is going to be that solid level of resistance as long as you can start to see that breather in the stock market. You're down, I think it's 15% on the Dow market, right? History has told us that when you're down 15% or 10 to 20%, it takes 7 months to get back for that stock market. And so you're looking at it and then saying, hey, we got to rebuild this. We got to get this going. But I do think that you have that resistance or that level around that 188 to 192 where you start to see that retracement of 50% retracement from last August, that you start to see those buyers come back in. But we need to see that liquidation, which made me happy about corn, which made me happy about soybeans, is you were having the ability for managed money to really sell these markets before we got to this point. So you can come in with fresh buyers. I don't know if livestock saw that necessarily. We weren't all that far away from record long holdings in live cattle. How much did you really see? So I think you're seeing those funds leave now, but that would be my target.
Are they leaving the feeder market then?
Yeah, I think it's similar, right?
Okay.
I think you just follow that stock market and just the fears that you could see. I don't know if tariffs are all that ugly in general, maybe for cattle, but it's just the emotional side of things in the stock market.
For hogs, also limit down on Friday, but that came after we had good export volume.
Huge export volume when you look at the hog market. Same situation, I think, summer hogs, when you look at it, your support's probably around 88 bucks, $3 lower, I think it is, when you look at them overall. You got a friendly hog and pig report. I felt like that was enough to give a little bit of support. And really, when you look at the tie for hogs, Mexico is so key there. And so is Canada, playing a big role in it. And so far, we've had good relationships with them, or they're working towards those good relationships, right? You have not seen them involved in this last round, and hopefully that's enough. But I would say you look at those retracement counts and you're getting close.
So of the three livestock then, the only one to really, are any of those going to get caught up in tariff talk, or is it more economic talk because of tariffs?
Yeah, so I think when I look at cattle, my concern would be, right, so you're going to tariff the cows coming in, right? You talk about the cattle coming in, and you've had this argument from producers for so long saying we need to stop these from coming in, which is great. You stop them from coming in, but does that mean that the buying just follows them to their countries, or do we see exports remain strong for the U.S.? And I think that's what we're going to watch, is that if you keep the cattle out, we need to make sure that our exports aren't completely dropping off as well.
All right. Kristi, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Kristi Van Ahn Kjeseth, thank you. We're going to pause the analysis, continue our discussion about these markets in our Market Plus segment. You can find both analysis and plus on our website of markettomarket.org. This program is a weekly offering, and so is our newsletter. We pull back the curtain and let you know about side conversations, production secrets, and ways that you can be a part of events before the general public does. Sign up for the Market Insider newsletter on our website right now. Next week, a look at CRP compliance across the U.S. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week.
Market to Market is a production of Iowa PBS, which is solely responsible for its content.
What's next doesn't happen by chance. It happens when researchers and farmers work together to solve tomorrow's agronomic challenges. We're committed to creating what's next, because a pioneer, our name is our mission.
For over 45 years, Steiner Tractor Parts has shared your love of antique tractors, new parts for old tractors. Learn more at steinertractor.com or at 877-559-7887.
Tomorrow. For over 100 years, we've worked to help our customers be ready for tomorrow. Trust in tomorrow. Information is available from a Grinnell Mutual agent today.